This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Mark August is a veteran camera operator and a filmmaker with 25 years in the U.S. Navy as a combat photographer. He's a veteran of the Desert Storm War in 1991 and the global war on terrorism in Afghanistan. He's now retired as of a couple of months ago of the Navy. Let's see, I wrote this script. Hold on a second. He's now retired, but was a member of the Navy Dive Unit Undersea Rescue Command, the U.S. Navy's only submarine rescue unit, and retired from the Navy just a couple of months ago. He's a current member of the Camera Guild Local 600, founding member of the Digital Cinema Society, veterans in film and television, and currently president of the Society of Camera Operators. That's just way too much stuff, Mark. Congratulations.
Well,
welcome. Good to have you with us.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here and allowing the SOC to be here.
Well, once I read your resume, I had to chat with you. I mean, what got you started as a combat photographer?
Personally, it was meeting my mother's employer, and he was a combat photographer in the Army. And he would share all these amazing images, and photography just became something to elaborate on drawing and art that I enjoyed doing the most, and then just learning that all this composition was part of art. And I never thought it would take me to where I'm at. I never realized it.
Was it the photography that appealed to you or the combat?
You know, being as small as I am in my stature, I'm only 5'5", and I loved physical sports. And the photography was fun because I got to be creative and express myself through that. When a lot of photographers, cinematographers, people that in the industry, they like to be creative, and that's something I've always inspired to be.
Now, you were in it for 25 years.
Yes, didn't think I would be in that long, I'll be honest.
What was it that caught your attention? Why so long?
You know, to be a Navy photographer was, to me, an honor. It was not easy. Every time I turned around, I'd meet a sailor that wanted to be or have my job. And every time I got an assignment, I got to go meet new people in the Navy or the Army, and they learned that there's photographers in the military. I found myself looking back and saying, I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky to have this opportunity to serve my country and to have that job description and represent the Navy or just represent our armed forces.
Well, cast your mind back, 25 years.
Okay.
First gig on the job. What kind of gear were you shooting?
Wow. First job I really was given, I was on the USS Midway, which is now an aircraft carrier museum in San Diego. And Mr. Johnson, our lieutenant, he had just bought a brand new Nikon FM2, brand new camera, had it in a box. And he took a shining to me, and I was the new guy. Mm-hmm. And that's putting it lightly. And I got to go film the USS Midway, the Battle of Midway's anniversary with the commanding officer for the little magazine that they published on the ship. So the photography that I took was going to be in the magazine. So it's part of the ship's history, and my photograph made it in that magazine. So that was my first assignment, and I just remember the basic composition of shooting. It was film, and everybody said it was a great shot, and it was just a cake being cut by the commanding officer of the ship.
Wow.
So that's one of my first real assignments.
The gear's changed since then.
Oh, yes.
We've moved from film to digital, and the cameras seem to evolve at a dizzying pace, but has the work changed? How's being a combat photographer? Think about the time that you were in Iraq or Afghanistan. Was the assignments, the process of shooting different?
The process of shooting, it's changed with digital. Everything became instant. So you took an image, you took some footage if you filmed it, and, my supervisors in the military wanted it as immediately, and we had to download it and create our dailies, send those off to our supervisors make sure they're captioned right. So we were constantly working against the clock, and that was the hardest part, was looking at the watch, while you're watching, trying to beat the time, and then going back out and do it again.
Now, why was the clock so important?
What
deadlines were you meeting?
Well, because of, the digital age now that, coming into the 90s and going into 2000, everything was instant. And before, we didn't have to do that. We could download our film, process it.
No, I understand that, but what were you delivering the photographs to? I mean, you're not a news organization. Who was the consumer?
You know, a lot of times we weren't told what our images were being used for, but you'd have these meetings with our chiefs telling us, you know, some of the work that we've done has gone all the way to the top, you know, at the Pentagon or to the president himself. So just keep doing what you're doing and try not to focus on what your images are going to be used for, but just focus on your job. And that kept us kind of grounded.
So like you were shooting and you had no idea who was seeing the pictures?
Oh, I knew who my supervisors were sending it to, but I didn't ask a lot of questions. And it was difficult because sometimes you knew where it was going to go or what it was used for. But it wasn't my place to tell the people why I was taking photographs or filming something or recording.
Let's go back to Afghanistan when you were there. What was a typical assignment?
For myself there, I was with Naval Special Warfare, which was the SEAL teams, and for public relations, and just showing the conditions of the base. Back then, it was just considered a tent city. It was very brief, and then a few patrols. That's pretty much all I could talk about. It was just more public relations and showing the conditions. And I think later on I saw images and didn't recognize the base. Were
you ever in a dangerous situation as you were shooting?
I did. I did some dumb things by not paying attention, or I walked into a field of grass not realizing it was a landmine field. So bad decisions. But we all kind of made some dumb things. But I think most important thing was learning from the senior guys that were there just before me or only been in country a little while, and watching what they do and paying attention, and you learn real fast.
Well, you retired in March.
I did.
And you've been involved in filmmaking in the military for 25 years. Now you're trying to make it as a veteran into the film industry as a civilian. What's it like to make that transition?
Well, in 1993, I left the Navy full-time and I went to the reserve. So I was been a reserve combat photographer, just for clarification. And the first time I tried to get into the industry, I just hit a lot of brick walls. And lucky for me, a gentleman by the name of Harry Humphreys, who is a technical advisor who's good friends with Michael Bay, needed a photographer for a film that they had just started working on called Transformers. And I got involved with that through Harry Humphreys because of the SEAL teams. And that just went on to going into Panavision, working there for 5 years as a technician in high definition. And that transitioned into going into the Union, still staying in the reserves while I was there. Had some assignments, went to North Korea for a month, took some time off in my real job at Panavision to go work for the military, and just continued to grow my resume.
One of the things that you've done combat photography, you've done camera operation, and you've also been a cinematographer. How do you differentiate between them? What makes them different?
In my point of view, our cinematographers are your leaders on a crew, and they're management. They're managing not just people, but production's money, and looking at budgets and how much gear is going to cost and what gear they need to order, and communicating that with the director. And it becomes a leadership role, and on top of lighting. So there's many things that they're doing. They're handling the camera department, of course, the grip department, and electric department. So the cinematographer is involved in a very important role on a production.
So you're really differentiating the cinematographer as a manager, where I've traditionally thought of the cinematographer as the person that handles the lighting and the look. There's a big difference between the two.
There is a big difference, but when that one person is in charge of it, they collaborate with all the key players for those departments. So your cinematographer is working with his camera operator and his first AC. In the camera department. In the grip department, he's working on his key grip. He's talking to them about lighting, the electrical, and in the electric department. So it's a collaboration, and it's a team effort. It's not a one person that's doing all the work. So when you hear cinematographers giving praise to their crew, it's because without them, they can't do their jobs, and it's no different from a camera operator. Working with his crew, making sure that we all communicate correctly, and then communicating with our grips.
So tell me what the role of the camera operator is then.
So the role of our camera operator, from my experience, a lot has been working with the director and looking at the composition of what the director wants, and then communicating that with the director of photography or the cinematographer, and working with the composition. So it's back to photography. And at the same time, you're communicating with your crew that's working with you, your dolly grip, when you're going to do a push-in, So again, you're managing the people that you're working closely with, and it just becomes a collaboration.
Now, clearly, with smaller films that don't have the ability to have both a camera operator and a cinematographer, all these roles roll into one. But on a larger production, the camera op is more concerned about framing, and the cinematographer is more concerned about the light inside the frame, if you exclude the management role?
Correct to a certain extent.
How would you clarify?
I'll give you an example. I was on a show, on an NBC show, and the director of photography was an award-winning cinematographer. And he's Australian, and he asked me a question, and he said, "Mark, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, why don't we start on a cowboy and push into a Warner Brothers?" And he says, "I love it." And then later on, he says, "Why don't we do a 3 Ts and go into a haircut?" And the crew had no idea what we were talking about. So again, what it was the cinematographer was giving direction on how he wanted the framing. And they had already talked about that with the director. So it was quite funny because later on, the director was saying he learned what the haircut meant for framing. And he said, "Let's go with a haircut and go back to cowboy." And everybody was like, "What is going on with these weird, old films or, all these terms?" And the other people on the crew had no idea what we were talking about. And the funny part was I remember the director saying, "Let's push into a haircut." And then the first AD screamed, "We're going to a haircut." And I thought to myself, why is he saying that? That's all towards the camera operator. But it was funny because the whole crew was thinking, what's going on with haircuts and cowboys? And again, it was all framing. That's all those terms are framing for the camera operator. So yes, there's a big collaboration with everybody. So it's interesting how we all work together, and when you work well with others and you start communicating, it makes it so much fun.
Well, it's also interesting how people love to have jargon. They love to have a secret language that includes them and excludes others, just as what was happening between you and the cinematographer and the director, because you had your own secret language, the sort of shortcut of how you were going to explain stuff.
And that's fun because in the Society of Camera Operators, which I'm currently the president, we teach these things. We teach these classes, and we help others learn the language, whether it be, for example, what a cowboy is. I'll explain that.
Please, because I'm dying of curiosity.
Okay. So when Westerns were being made, the cinematographers would frame up so that you could see the bottom of the guns on the cowboy. So when they would frame it up, they would pull back the camera so you can see the bottom of the guns or see the gun so that you can tell that cowboy had weapons on him. So that's the framing you would start on.
That's cowboy framing.
That's a cowboy framing. So it was just kind of like a medium shot. And then if you wanted to push in where it was nice and tight, you would actually give the person a haircut. And Warner Brothers was famous for giving their actors haircuts.
Now, the haircut refers to
a real tight shot where it actually looked like they were cutting off their bangs. So with those terminologies, you can communicate and not confuse the camera operator on what the shot wants from the director or cinematographer. And they can say, "Hey, push into a cowboy," or give me a little bit of a haircut, or not too much of a haircut. And so with those terms, it makes the cameraman it makes it easier for the cameraman. Just those are simple things.
Well, it's much easier and more fun to say cowboy and haircut than close up and wide shot. So
I remember working with on I'm trying to think of the show, Revenge, and Cynthia Puznik, our director of photography, was calling out saying, "Where are we at on where's my T-stop?" And we're fully open at a 2.8. Oh, let's go to a 4. And one of the actors says, "What's with all the numbers? What does this mean?" And so, it was just communication on set. And we're out counting 4s and 2s and a 2.8. And it was funny because we're yelling it out in the middle of the crew. And the crew's going, "What's with these numbers?" So it doesn't always have to be the lingo, but can be the apertures of the camera. So that's what we were talking about, apertures. Because she was looking at the lighting for that scene.
Now, you are the president of the Society of Camera Operators. Tell me about the organization. What does it do?
Absolutely. The organization started in 1979. It was a group of camera operators that wanted more training for camera operators, just like we're talking about with these terms. And so at the time, there was no organization. The cinematographers had an organization on top of the union having it. The unions would have classes on certain aspects, but specifically camera operators. So in 1979, a group of gentlemen started this organization, and then they developed it into a nonprofit. Our nonprofit benefits the Children's Hospital Vision Center. and they've been raising money since. We're at 184,000 total given to Children's Hospital.
Wow.
That's donated, and it's been from men and women donating their time as a volunteer, just like myself, to give back to a charity. And we do charity events. We have a big fundraiser with our
Yes, but you haven't told me what the organization does. Let's focus on the organization, not the results.
So we give classes. We've had a Bill Hines course. He's one of our founding members, and we have a 101 course, Bill Hines, teaching camera operating from a basic step.
Why does somebody need to join the organization? I mean, there's a guild of camera operators. Doesn't the union provide this sort of training as well?
They do provide the training, but not as hands-on as what we started to provide. How to use wheels, which is your gear heads, which is different from a fluid head, and that's the base of the camera. How to use that, how to use pedestals, how to do a sitcom, communicating with our grips and working with dollies. I teach an underwater class that's every 2 years, and teaching underwater with a great cinematographer by the name of Pete Romano. He is, if you look him up, you'd just be amazed at some of the things that he's accomplished, and he'll help and teach and give us tips on how to film underwater. For example, putting a tennis ball on the end of a pole, putting that right below the surface and focusing on the tennis ball, and then the actor can see where he or she needs to jump in the water just before they remove the pole. So when the actor enters the water, the camera's already in focus. And those are little tips you would never have known if it wasn't for these courses and collaborating with other cinematographers or camera operators to talk about these courses and classes. And we provide those all for free without any extra cost. And then the most important thing recently was we've redeveloped our magazine. And our articles for Camera Operator Magazine, which is the name of the magazine, is written by articles for camera operators by camera operators. And they're all volunteers. There's no writing staff. And for example, this month we had one from The Walking Dead. We've been working with Colin Anderson, SOC. He's one of our active members, and he's currently working with our editor for the new Star Wars film. He was the camera operator for the film coming out in late December.
Now, who can become a member, and who can get the magazines? Do you have to be a member of the union? Can be an independent filmmaker?
Well, that's the great thing about the organization. It's not a union. You do not have to be in the union. It's not a qualification. We have 3 tiers of membership, which would be our active. Any camera operator that's been actively involved for 5 years of camera operating experience. And then we have our associates, and that's our camera assistants, our first AC, seconds, directors of photography, our DITs. We now have producers. And then we have our student members. And then we have our honorary members. So some of our honorary members would be Mr. Clint Eastwood, Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, Penny Marshall. They've all become members of our organization. Just recently, we just inducted, I'm trying to think of her name. I'm just sorry.
That's all right. So if an independent filmmaker wants to join the organization, can they, and how?
Yes, actually, if you wanted to join, you can go to our website. It's soc.org. And if you go into membership, you can apply. And from there, you'll get our magazines. We have screenings during award seasons, all the training classes. We have a barbecue once a year that's coming up this weekend. And go to all these events and learn about cameras and find out how you can become a camera operator professionally, network with some really big names in our industry. For example, I've got to become friends with, Stephen Campanelli. He's a current member, an active member, and he only works with Clint Eastwood, and he's just directed his 2nd major film. So he's moving up to director. Colin Anderson, who I just mentioned, has just finished Star Wars. And they're all members. Gentlemen like Dan Gold. Dan Gold he's an amazing camera operator and works on some of the greatest comedy films. I was asking about Ted 2. He's worked on some great films, Hangover 1, and talking with him. And then I'm trying to think. There's just so many camera operators that week. Mitch Dubin, he works with Steven Spielberg.
How much does membership cost?
Our membership goes off the 2 tiers. What I did was I just changed. We have our student members are at $35 a year, and that would include your magazine and the training for our students because it's affordable for them, especially since they are in school. And then we have our associates members, and that's $100 a year. And then we go up to $150 for our active. So it's very very inexpensive to join. You do have to be sponsored, and just being a part of it, we collaborate and network together as a group.
Now, what does the word sponsored mean, very quickly?
So if I were asking you to sponsor and you say you want to be in the organization, in your application, I would put my name down as your sponsor. The purpose of that is so we have any questions to ask about your affiliations with any organizations or some of your skill set, we can go back to the sponsor instead of having, if you're not available to talk to.
Cool. Mark, the website again for the organization is?
The organization is www.soc.org.
That's soc.org, and Mark August is the president of the Society of Camera Operators. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.